gonna start shipping and selling it a month later. I went there and said, here's the product. And they were like, wow, they were blown away. Like, how the hell did you pull this up in 9 months? Like, it's beautiful, it's fantastic. And so let's work together and all this, let's figure out how we're gonna, I said, listen, I'm beginning to ship this next month. And then we launched the product, and the product went from $0 to $25 million in the first 12 months. Part of that is this fear of failure, right? If an organization or people within an organization are afraid of being punished because they made a mistake, then they're not going to make decisions. We have been very much focused on solving this interaction connection problem, because that is the core. Once we unlock that, then all of a sudden you enable all these possibilities. For every therapist, there's 350 people that need therapy in the US. For every one therapist, 350 clients, potential clients. That means 80 to 90% of the population are not getting active therapy.
That's amazing. Look at that. Like you took a situation that most people would have buckled in while the economy is crashing. All the pressures, all the odds are stacked against you, right? And then if we think about what happened to you earlier in your childhood, and like it almost was a grounding moment for you, and you saw the better path, you saw the clearer path. Welcome to the 8 Growth Ventures podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Paolo Pirjanian, a pioneer in personal robotics and the visionary behind Embodied INC and its revolutionary AI companion, Moxie. We'll dive into Paolo's journey from JPL to iRobot, and he's shaping the future of child development with robotics. Get ready for inspiring conversation. I'm Hamad Azarian. Let's get started. Paolo, thanks for joining us today. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have you on. I'm really excited to hear everything going on with Moxie and overall all the exciting stuff happening with Embodied. But before we get started, like what we usually like to do is kind of journey in your past, come to your present, and then to definitely talk about your vision of the future. What I'm really curious on is I know you immigrated to the US. You've shared this journey that you've come through leaving Iran and then eventually ending up in here in the US. Can you tell me a little bit about what that experience was for you in those early days, and how you feel that transition of where you left from Iran at that time and the journey here has helped shape who you are as a person and some of the leadership lessons it's embedded inside of?
Yes, Hamlet, thank you first of all for having me on the podcast. Very excited to share my experience with you, and hopefully it's interesting to your audience. So I was, as an Armenian born in Iran, a region that experienced a lot of instability during my early childhood. As a result of that, that instability, of course, translates to the stability of anyone living in that region. We had to eventually leave the country, actually fleeing through the mountains to Turkey, and then from Turkey ending up in Denmark as refugees, where you have to learn a new language, integrate yourself into a new culture, being away from your family and all these things. So I've actually reflected on this question that you just asked in terms of how it has shaped me. And I feel like when, as young as you are, when you have to deal with uncertainty, especially
how old were you, by the way, roughly when this
in the first time I left Iran, I was 11. My parents basically sent me to a boarding school in England. We went there for 2 years and then came back to live with my parents to go to England. And that's where the war between Iran and Iraq started. And
the revolution had already occurred, and now there was a war as well. Wow. Okay.
Correct. And then when we came back, we basically came back to basically say goodbye to our family members, because my parents were then going to move with us to the UK for good. And then that's when the war happened between Iraq and Iran. And immediately the government shut down the borders because they wanted.
And at this point, you're probably military serving age, right?
I'm not actually yet. I was actually, when I came back, so I was 11 when I left. I was 14 when I came back. My brother is 3 years older than me, so he was 17. As a result of the war leading to the government shutting the borders, we had to stay in Iran, but went back to school. At the time, if you graduated high school, then you had to go serve in the army. And then at the time, because of the war, they would give you like a month of training, give you a gun, and say, go to the front line. Uh, so my brother was a year away from being sort of recruited to do that. Um, then my parents decided that it's time for us to figure out a way to get out of Iran. This is not our war, and the only way to get out of Iran at the time was illegally getting out of Iran. So we fled through the mountains, my brother and I, through the mountains to Turkey. And for those that know the history between Armenians and Turks, they can easily put two and two together and conclude that it's not a very safe place to be. As an Armenian illegally in Turkey at a teenage age, they would have thought we are there to sabotage the government or we are whatever. So the goal was to get out of Iran first. We did that. The next goal was get out of Turkey, and we did that, and we ended up in Denmark. Again, not planned, but it was just the path out.
Wow.
And when I reflect back on how it has shaped me, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship, I would say, is that when you're going through this kind of journey, which is you literally don't know what the next step is going to look like. There's so much uncertainty involved. Our journey through the mountains was each stakes. We had to navigate through the mountains. There was many threats we had to avoid. On one hand, the threat was that if we were spotted by the border guards of Iran, they would have captured us, put us in prison, and we would have served for years as a teenager in prison. If we were caught by the border guard on the Turkish side, we could have been shot, dead, and then there was many other threats. And you have to rely heavily on your instinct to survive, right? And your instincts are heightened to the max, like super sharp. You're very acute sense of everything going on, and you have to rely on your instincts to make the right decision at a sort of instant.
You have a guide, I'm hoping, at this point, or someone that's traversed this path, or
Yeah, we had a guide or many guides. We were passed on from one smuggler to the next, to the next, to the next. I mean, they knew it, but the threats were still there. So, for instance, at some point, I remember when we were approaching the border of Iran and Turkey. At that time, we had become a whole caravan of things and goods that were being smuggled.
Wow.
We were just one of the merchandise. There were Persian rugs, there were cigarettes, there were probably drugs, I'm not sure. But there was a ton of things being smuggled, and it was a caravan going in that direction, like a mile or two away from the border through this canyon in a territory that was controlled by the Kurds. Kurds had their own military called the Mujahideen, actually. They were they were called the Democrats or something like that. So they were patrolling this region. They met with the smugglers. They got their cut. They had to pay them. And then they said, okay, stay here. We're gonna go forward and make sure the path is clear, and we'll give you the signal to move on. So we're sitting there waiting. It was just around dawn, so the sun was setting, and then all of a sudden these guards come back on their horses, galloping towards us and screaming, "Run for your life!"
Oh my goodness!
So it is this group of people that assembled here. That just everyone spreads in any direction. I was on feet at the time. My brother was on the horse. The horse just ran off. I started running in a different direction. So everyone ran just in different directions. And the reason was that the Turkish border patrol had spotted us. So they were gonna come after us, shoot us, whatever. So we ran, and our guide at the time was guiding us to run towards the Turkish border. So we did that. We ran in there. We went into cornfields, and it got dark. We hid in the cornfields for like 24 hours until the path was clear, and then we got out and then continued our path and so on. But this is one instance, an example of relying on your instincts and trying to survive. And when you look back, and how could that have shaped your ability to make decisions, I think dealing with uncertainty, especially in this kind of situation where life and death is important, leads you to be able to rely on your instincts a lot more. And as an entrepreneur, everything you deal with is uncertainty. I mean, building a startup is figuring out how to navigate through uncertainty to find that one or two possible paths to success, and not falling uh, apart as you're sort of dealing with all the unknowns. You don't know exactly what the path is going to look like, but you have enough self-confidence to believe that you will figure it out.
Right.
This
So
is
buying
one.
it might be you're buying some time, but you're iterating and you're looking for the next path or the next journey that you should be going under and being able to survive through that. Right. And in similar ways, like what happened to you at such an early childhood, it sounds like is you were kind of doing the same thing, right? That the real life and death situation that you went through allowed you to see things in a way that most people might break down or give up. But for you, you're like, oh, it's okay. We'll figure this out. What's the next path we should go on? What's the next journey we should take, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Yes. So I would say one thing you learn is acutely being aware of how to navigate uncertainty, which is, I think, absolutely important for any entrepreneur. The second one is how to deal with risk and the ability to not be afraid of jumping in there and taking a risk. Because again, it's similar that if you have enough conviction and that is the right thing to do, it doesn't matter how large the risk is, you'll figure it out. So I think these things definitely shape me in the way I make decisions and in the way I sort of figure out how to navigate very complex startups. As Embodied or the previous companies I've done, it's always been deep tech, which is challenging in terms of just the complexity of the technology you have to develop.
Right. I love that. So let's transition. Now you're in the US, right? So you, at this point, are working at JPL. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience there and what are you doing exactly at JPL? And then at what point do you realize that, hey, that I should be doing something else? Can we kind of talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So yeah, JPL was my childhood dream job, or for working for NASA. That I always wanted to work for NASA. I was inspired by the moon landing and anything related to NASA always. So this was literally a childhood dream job, and I worked there for a couple of years when I first moved to the US. I was working on research programs for robots for exploring space, Mars particularly. So I developed, with a team of people, developed robots that can build structures in a space, traverse cliff sites for finding minerals and stuff like that. While I was there, I got contacted by a company called ID Lab that I had never heard about before. That is from ID Lab in Pasadena by Bill Gross of ID Lab, who is a serial or a parallel entrepreneur, has started many, many companies, many of them successful.
What year is this? Because Idea Lab started in '96, right? Is that the early days of Idea Labs, or what is
So they contacted me when this happened. It was 2001.
Wow, so it's really early. So for most of the listening audience that might not know of Idea Lab is literally the first accelerator studio, venture studio, more or less, right? Is that a pretty fair assessment of what Bill was building at that time, correct?
Yeah, I mean, they had I think they called it an incubator, but it's the same concept. They incubated a bunch of ideas, and they has the name Idea Lab. Actually, the full name of the legal entity, I think, is called Bill Gross's Idea Lab, because Bill Gross has millions of ideas per minute, and this was the entity that allowed him to create companies around each of the ideas. And so in 2001, they reached out to me, and I eventually met with Bill, and Bill wanted to build the Microsoft of robotics.
Wow.
Was the vision. He and I discussed it a little bit. I felt it's way too early to think of building a software platform for robotics. But nonetheless, I found Bill super interesting, and I was always curious about entrepreneurship. I wondered, how do you start a company? How do you raise money? How do you build a team? How do you launch a product, and so on? These are all things that Bill had done many times very successfully. So I thought to myself, you know what? Although I don't believe that it's possible to become Microsoft of robotics at that age, I don't even think it's possible today. I thought I would learn a lot about entrepreneurship, which is why I left my childhood dream job at JPL and just following my curiosity about entrepreneurship and joined the company as the CTO to start this company called Evolution Robotics. And I eventually became the CEO of the company and had a successful exit.
So how old were you when this was occurring, roughly?
So this was, did I say 2001? So I was 33 years old.
33 years old. Okay. So you left what was your childhood dream. There sounds like there was some innate desire to continue pushing your boundaries and you going past your comfort zone, which probably what you were seeking a little bit of. And then you went and joined Bill and started working with him at Evolution Robotics, right? When you joined, what was your role there initially? You were the CTO
The
or
CTO.
CTO? Okay. And I believe Evolution struggled early on, right? If my team did their research properly,
Correct.
This, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because then you ended up actually buying it from Bill or some version of this. Did we do our research correctly? Did we understand?
Sort of. So what happened is that this notion of software for robotics or Microsoft of robotics, unfortunately, my initial intuition was right. It was way too early. So ideally, I've invested almost $40 million in pursuing that, and we gained no traction on the business side. However, we developed some amazing breakthrough technologies. But now Idealab was at the point where they were like, we're tapped out. We are not going to continue funding this company. So they decided to shut it down. And I negotiated with the Idealab and the board of directors of Idealab to spin it out into a new company. And with a business model that I presented them, which was building our own product rather than trying to become a software platform, building our own products and launching our own products. And I pitched them with the whole business plan, and they said, this is fantastic, but who is going to fund it? Up until that moment, I think our burn rate monthly on a monthly basis was like $1.5 million a month, right? So when I pitched them to spin it out into a new co, I was going to take a core team members with me, all of them in technology, and spin it out into a new co. And I told Idealab, listen, if you give me a loan for, I believe it was $2 million in working capital, I will return it back to you by end of the year. And I'll give you a pretty sizable portion of the company in exchange for all the IP that we are assigning to the new co. So given the fact that they were already burning $1.5 million a month, this was so laughable for them. They agreed to it. They said, sure. I don't know if they believed it will work out, but they said, well, we don't have much to lose for it, right? So they basically they gave me a loan for $2 or $3 million. We spun it out. We started going after the business model that we believed in. And within the first year, we did $3 million in revenue, which had never, ever happened in the history of the company. And at this point, we were less than 10 people actually in the new spin out. And then I went to Idealab at the end of the year. I said, I would like to talk about returning your money back. And they said, no, please keep to $2 million. As a matter of fact, we want to invest additional money.
How much more do you need, right?
So then we went and raised additional money. We launched our first product, which was a robotic floor cleaner for hardwood floors. Grew that from $0 to $25 million in the first year, and then got acquired by iRobot.
Amazing. So it sounds like the pivot that occurred in the organization, and I want to dig into this a little bit, right? So the pivot that occurred is how big was the team, and then you pulled how many people out from the team? Is this a core 10? It sounds like that came with you, or
I think actually we started like with 5, including myself. We were 5, and by the end of the year, that first year, I think we were like 8 or 10 people, somewhere in that range.
Okay. So all of you, I'm guessing, were in it, right? You were in it to win it. You had founders mentality. You guys knew that, hey, we're onto something great. Let's stay focused. Let's try to get this done. Prior to that, how big was the team? Was it much larger than that, or was
Oh,
that?
at points we were about 100 people.
Wow. Okay. So this is a classic example for how the organization maybe had gotten too big and had lost focus, and the organization was trying to do different things, and you took the core group and pulled them out and reshifted focus into something that seemed to have better visibility and direction, and quickly turned it around. Right? Am I hearing this correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Correct.
That's amazing. And then so now we have a consumer product. For those people who don't know that consumer product, let's talk a little bit. It was what the vision of what eventually is known as iRobot today. Is that what?
No, no,
No?
no. So iRobot existed already. iRobot
Okay.
had launched the Roomba robotic vacuum cleaner, which was a very successful product. The Roomba is a round shape, disc shaped robotic vacuum cleaner. One challenge they had was a technical breakthrough they were for years pursuing and never figured it out, was for the robot to have the ability to map the home and navigate systematically cleaning the floor from room to room to room. So what they had resorted to works almost like your pool cleaner. So running at random direction, and if you give it enough time, eventually it will clean.
You will find this. It will go through the right spot eventually.
Right. But obviously not the most efficient way of cleaning the floors. It's also not the best user experience because the user is looking at, oh, you missed that spot, and the robot never makes it to that spot. So we had developed, this was one of the core technologies we had developed when we were part of Idea Lab. We had developed the world's first visual mapping and navigation technology.
Wow.
And that core technology is what we use in our first product. And that's one of the reasons also why iRobot was interested in acquiring us, because they had spent hundreds of millions of dollars and years trying to develop that technology without success. And so when they saw it growing rapidly, they were left with no option but having to take us out. And the reason that I actually accepted the acquisition offer is because at the time it was extremely hard to raise money for hardware and robotics startups. I mean, even today, if you talk to the VC community, it's extremely hard. Most VCs don't understand or want to invest in hardware companies. Back then, it was almost non-existent. So as a result, when we got an offer from iRobot, we took it. We said it's a good offer. We combine forces with them. We can enable their product with our technology and grow to become the market leader, which is exactly what happened.
Amazing. So let me give you my iRobot experience. I had the circular one, the dumb one that would just go bang everything and bang the furniture left and right. And then now we have the square one with the app, with the mapping, with the zones, with the scheduling, the whole 9 yards, right? So I can already tell you as a consumer, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have made my life a lot easier. I don't have to go lap everything anymore. It's all scheduled and on determination. But how did you guys build this? Like, so it was this, so it's the core team, you guys saw this as the main problem early on, or this was an evolution to that? Or where did you realize that, hey, if we could figure this out, this is really what's missing? You weren't talking to consumers at this point, right? So was it just a hunch of like, hey, this is the gap in the market and this is what we should go after and this is where the real value release could be, or how did all that?
Is the question about the core technology or the first product we launched?
The first product you launched and understanding how to position it so that, because you weren't a consumer product at that point, right? You were really at this stage, you were trying to be an OS, it sounded like, and this was the first iteration to a consumer product, and you nailed it. Like, so most people don't do that on the first go around, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, so having had the experience prior to the spin out, uh, we I wanted to go vertical because I couldn't see a market for a platform play. Even today, I think it will be hard to become a Microsoft of robotics. We may be much closer now, but we are talking about 20 years has passed since that time, right? So we said we are going to go vertical, and we evaluated and said which vertical do we go after. One is validated, is iRobot. iRobot has validated robotic floor care is a massive market. We can go after that. Our technology plays very well into that market and all these things. We could go after lawn mowing, we could go after toys and so on. So what we actually did first was in the first year that I mentioned, we made $3 million of revenue. I actually went out and created partnerships with each of these verticals. So we created a partnership with Dirt Devil, which is uh, one of the main floor care companies in the US, for building a smart robotic vacuum cleaner. So we said you will use your expertise and your brand and our technology, and let's build a product that competes with iRobot. We go, we made a partnership with John Deere to create a robotic lawnmower. And we create a partnership with a company called Wowie Toys to build a robotic toy. So we pitched three things and we got them to pay $1 million upfront to pay for the development of us integrating our technology into the product and help them with the product development and so on. And by the way, at the time, I still believe that we got to launch our own products, but we didn't have the capital to do it. I mean, with $2 million, we couldn't have done that. So we did this as the first step. We started building these products with them. 2008 happened. The market crashed. All of the CEOs called me and said, we are putting this project on hold because we are bleeding for our core business. We have to focus on that. And we are not going to launch any new product, a revolutionary product like this for now. And that was
like it's like, oh, we got a lifeline, and then sorry, your lifeline's away.
right. By the way, so I remember. By the way, after we signed these deals, we also signed a deal with Procter and Gamble for doing a sweeter bot, and so on. We had 4 or 5 deals like this that we have engaged.
Amazing. By the way, amazing finding the right strategics, getting the deals on the table, and then closing those deals is like a brilliant move that people for early stage founders, right? If you got a great tech, you don't have all the resources, you go find the right organization that you can partner with, and then with that, you can then not only get capital, you can have a distribution channel in play, and you can also have years of like you basically superpowered the organization in a really short time frame. I love that.
Right. And then what happened is that we used those deals as leverage to raise our first financing round. We raised, if I recall correctly, like $8 or $9 million we raised. We closed the financing like in May of 2008. 2 months later, the world is falling apart. Everyone is panicking. My investors are panicking. My team is panicking. In the meanwhile, I was trying to convince my investors that had just joined our cap table that we should go vertical and launch our own products. Because my worry was the following. With the business model I talked about, if you have 1,000 partners like that or 100 partners like that, it's a robust business model that you can say, okay, even if 10 out of 100 succeed, I'll still be a successful business. But when you have 5, if like 3 of them fail, any of them fail, you don't have a robust business model, right? And my worry was that these guys, we may kill ourselves to execute on our part, but we rely on their ability to execute and they may fail. And what's going to happen with that? So I was trying to convince my new investors about that. And they were like a bit spooked. And I said, we just invested a bunch of money in your company with this business model in mind. What are you telling us? And I said, I'm just telling you, I'm nervous about whether this business model is robust unless we have 100 customers, which we cannot support with a team of 10, 15. How do you support 100 customers? So I said, I believe that we got to go vertical and all this. I wasn't able to convince them. So 2008, September or August, the market crashes, Lehman Brothers and all these things. And everyone is in panic, including my investors. My team comes to me and said, Paolo, we are screwed. And I said, you know what? I think there's a silver lining here. And they're like, what? What are you talking
You're
about?
like, we're not screwed. I had to go through the mountains.
I said,
We're okay. We're good.
Right. And they said, what is the silver lining? I said, the silver lining is that I've been trying to convince our investors that we got to go vertical and build our own product and launch our own product. And my board is absolutely not receptive to that. But now we have no other option but to do that.
Right.
So I literally in October of 2008, I went to my board and said, guys, I got a call from every any of all of the CEOs of this company saying we are putting the projects on hold. So unfortunately, what I was fearing happened, and all of them canceled because of the same exact reason. The market is crashed and all this thing. So they're like, what are we going to do now? I said, we have no other option but to double down and just go build our own product and launch it. And by that time, we had actually developed prototypes for Procter & Gamble. So P&G, we had developed this concept of a Swiffer bot, a robot that sweepers your hardwood flooring and so on. So we said, you know what, that's it. iRobot has validated the floor care market. We have the Swiffer bot. It plays well into our hand in terms of our strengths. Let's go build that product. In the meanwhile, we talked to Procter & Gamble. I said, we would like to partner with you guys to do this. And then every time I would go to Cincinnati to meet with them, there were 10 more people around the table. And I was worried that the decision-making process of this big corporation is just going to bump us down. And I told them, you said, listen, guys, let me take this product a bit further. When it's closer to commercialization, then I'll come back to you and then we can discuss if it makes sense. Because I was worried they will slow us down. We are agile.
You're moving fast. You have like an insurgent mentality. You're really, really going quick. And here's a big organization, and with every meeting, there's just another decision maker. Who's the real decision maker here? And they're becoming a little more risk averse, especially with everything going on.
Right. So, like a month before we actually start shipping the product, I went to P&G again, and I put the product on the table with the packaging and everything. It's done. It was done. We were literally gonna start shipping and selling it a month later. I went there and said, here's the product. And they were like, wow. They were blown away. Like, how the hell did you pull this up in 9 months? Like, it's beautiful, it's fantastic. And so let's work together and all these things. Let's figure out how we're gonna. I said, listen, I'm beginning to ship this next month.
Yeah.
Our launch partners are Amazon and Bed Bath & Beyond. And anything we have to decide today. Like, we cannot wait for months, right? And then what I was able to get out of them is I said, I would love to have the Swiffer pads in there, and I would love to have the Swiffer logo on the box, because there's huge brand recognition with that. And we got that for free, by the way. We got it free from them. They put the Swiffer logo on it. We put a couple of Swiffer pads in there. And then we launched the product, and the product went from $0 to $25 million in the first 12 months. And yeah, that's how we got about doing that.
That's amazing. Look at that. Like you took a situation that most people would have buckled in while the economy is crashing. All the pressures, all the odds are stacked against you, right? And then if we think about what happened to you earlier in your childhood, and like it almost was a grounding moment for you, and you saw the better path, you saw the clearer path, and you were able to get the whole organization mobilized on this, let alone execute it in a very, very, very quick and short time frame. And with all of that, everything going that potentially most people would have given up on, brought it to market, and then the market spoke, and the market spoke very clearly, and the rest is history, right? From that point on. Amazing job, Paolo. It's wonderful lessons there. So let's transition a little bit from there, okay? So Evolution Robotics comes, iRobot comes and acquires you guys. You are now in a bigger organization, right? Tell me how that was. And the reason I'm bringing this up is the history of the company Evolution Robotics, right? You guys were big, it wasn't working. You became small, you crushed it. You're now back in a big company again. And in the midst of that, you were partnering with big companies, and it wasn't really working either. So it felt like when you guys were young and hungry and small, everything ran smoothly, and whenever it wasn't that way, kind of slowed things down, or there was a the innovation slowed down, or the execution slowed down, or whatever it might be. Did that occur as well at iRobot, or what happened once the acquisition?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, iRobot is, I don't know if you have been following iRobot. iRobot is in big trouble right now because of the fact that they were not, even innovation was not a strength of iRobot. So in 2012, we got acquired by iRobot. We joined them, started working on integrating the teams. They asked me to be the CTO of the company. And I felt my charter there was to help them figure out how to innovate, because for 20 years, iRobot has been known for Roomba. At any time they've attempted to introduce a new product in the market, they have not been successful. So when I was at iRobot, it was clear to me why. I'll just summarize it to the following. Fantastic organization. The founder, amazing, has really strong skills, Colin Angle, and so on. But the culture of innovation did not exist at iRobot. And it's a number of different things. As an example, I mean, a culture of innovation needs to allow room for making mistakes, not mistake by ignorance, but mistake by trial and error, right? Because when you innovate, anything that is slightly more complex than, let's say, building a building, which we know exactly how to do, plan for and implement, you don't know exactly how you're going to get there. You're going to experiment, learn, and then try again, right? This iteration that we have, the hypothesis, build and test, iteration loops are super important in innovation. This is what Silicon Valley does really well, especially in software. But you can do the same in hardware.
It's the same in growth, by the way. It's the same exact thing we talk about, is the scientific method of the hypothesis, running it, seeing what happens. Most likely, 95% of the time, at least on the growth side of things, it doesn't work out. But you're going to learn something. And that lesson is what's going to bring you the path to whatever eventually becomes an innovative way, and which eventually leads to growth as well. Right. So it sounds like it's the same when it comes to building and anything like robots. At least that's what you've experienced, and that when that culture doesn't exist, it's going to stifle it. Correct? Am I saying?
Correct. Okay. Absolutely. And also part of that is this fear of failure, right? If an organization or people within an organization are afraid of being punished because they made a mistake, then they're not going to make decisions. Or they will analyze it to the nth degree before they make a decision, because they want to make sure they're making the right decision. And that analysis paralysis just does not work when you have to innovate. And these are the kind of signals that I saw at iRobot I was trying to help change. So it was all about the culture. But anyway, we came in, we got integrated. The first goal we had was to integrate our visual SLAM technologies, navigation technology, into Roomba. And already there, we were being met with resistance. By the way, these guys spent $75 million acquiring our company, and now they're resisting why we should integrate this into their product. It's like, why
did you just buy our company?
Right? It was not the CEO. The CEO saw the vision, but the rest of the team was resisting it. And it became a bit of a fight internally to get it integrated. We did integrate it, we got into the market and so on. And we went from there and helped them integrate a bunch of other technologies, advancing, like Roomba was not even connected to the cloud at the time.
Yep.
I'm like, the first thing we need to do is connect it to the cloud. That was a fight. Like they're like, why the
Thanks for all those fights, because I would not have bought the Roomba and enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it was not obvious to the organization why we need to be connected. And so I had to build up strategy. And these are the things that slow down things. And then the other thing I learned is that, especially through acquisitions, especially if you're the smaller entity in a merger and you get a high enough position in a company. I had I was the second position in the company, uh, that people, the incumbents, in anything you say, they put the most negative interpretation of what you say. So communication becomes really difficult because no matter what you say, people think you have an alternative motive. And why is he saying that? And why did he use this word? And so there is a book called Speed of Trust. When you have a team that trusts each other inherently, you can execute like there is no tomorrow.
Right.
It's like a soccer team where all the players know each other. You don't have to talk to each other and say, I'm going to pass the ball over there. You start running and charging towards. They already, body language and subliminal interaction, they know each other. So they can anticipate each other's moves. And the guy is over there before you have already sent the ball and all these things. So this all falls apart in a culture where there is lack of trust. This is why every book you read about company culture and team, its foundation is trust. And I think this applies in everything in life. Any relationship you have with your wife, with your kids, with your friends, with your family members, in your work colleagues, and so on. Trust is the important foundation. And of course, in bigger companies, it gets harder and harder to maintain that trust. And this was a bit of a struggle, although we made a lot of change and we helped the company grow its enterprise value from 800 million when they acquired us to about $4.5 billion. But unfortunately, as we sit here today, right now, it's at $300 million because they have been losing market share because innovation stopped after I don't want to say I left. I helped push innovation forward, but after I've left, I don't think that has happened as rapidly as it should have.
Got it. Okay. So you were there how many years? And then at what point you're like, okay, enough is enough. Time for me to leave. Is that kind of how it happened? Or was it the idea of Moxie started percolating inside of you? Like, can we, what I want to get to is where was the moment where you realized, hey, I need to go, there's something bigger that I want to build. And where did that come from?
Yeah. So I stayed there for 3 years. But in the back of my mind, I was constantly thinking about that there's something bigger I want to do. I mean, robotic vacuuming is cool, but it's not as world-changing as I would like it to be. There's much bigger things we can do with technology today. And especially during this time, technology was evolving really rapidly. So I was like itching to think about when to leave. But I had made a commitment to Colin more as a sort of man-to-man commitment to say, I'm gonna see this through until this point, and when that's reached, then I'm gonna move on. And that's what happened. At some point, I felt like I've delivered on my promise. And then I talked to Colin, decided to leave. He wasn't very sort of happy about that. He really tried to convince me to stay. I said, listen, life is too short. I've got to go do what I need to do. Although it's very risky to start a new enterprise at this point, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So I left in 2015, not knowing exactly which area I want to focus on, but there was a few areas I was thinking about, and I evaluated it during a 6-7 month period, and then decided that I'm going to go after an area which is social robots to help people in need, whether it's children that are struggling or whether it's elderly that are dealing with things such as loneliness.
I love it. So now Embodied is born, right? You're back to putting the gang together. Do you go call back the old guys and say, hey, let's get our team again? Or what happens? There's no walk me through this.
Yeah, so it's funny thing is that I probably overpaid my lawyers that negotiated all the agreements with iRobot because they had put in there a 5-year non-compete and non-solicitation clause that my lawyers had told me are not enforceable in California. Although they had missed that there's an exemption to it when you have goodwill exchange, cash exchange beyond regular compensation. There is actually an exemption to the law even in California where you cannot solicit or hire people if you have signed that agreement. So I couldn't get my old team back. So I had to build a team from scratch, which is very painful, very painful. Yeah, very costly too, because imagine if you start with a team that knows you and you know them well, you can start going really fast. So I had to actually start building a team from scratch, and training them and building the rapport and the culture and all these things. But we did it. But that was a painful lesson. Yeah. So one lesson is that hire good lawyers. Although this was from a very, very, very reputable law firm. I won't mention the name. It was like probably one of the most reputable law firms, but they definitely missed that part.
Okay. So Embodied gets born, a new team. You now have a new problem you want to solve, obviously, that you guys have made phenomenal headway on. So walk me through, this is now this is not your first time at the rodeo, right? So this is the second time around, and you guys are having incredible traction again, and in a very massive segment that's starting to pick up, which is companion robotics. If some people don't know the category that we're talking about, walk me through this. So walk me through, what do you see as the biggest problem in this category right now, and how do you believe you guys are solving this that's best in class in the category, in the industry, and why do you feel innovation is moving so quickly with your team and your organization?
Yeah, so the category is that it's basically companion robots or social robots. They're known as in academia, which is robots that can interact with you with emotion, and then help you with something, right? So many companies before Embodied were born to do this.
By the way, Paolo, I don't know if you know this. I am also a customer of this as well too. I have bought both of your products in life.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, so Moxie was with my son. I think we got version 1.
Yeah.
It was V1. I think I had shared that with you. I'm excited to try V2 with my daughter when she gets a little bit older, or the newest versions of it. But phenomenal on the interaction. Even at V1, it would still needed more. But I would love to hear where this is going. So
Yeah. So many companies prior to us actually went after this market, including SoftBank Robotics, which is a subsidiary of SoftBank. They spent $700 million trying to go after this market, and they failed. Another one was a MIT spinoff. Debo was the name of the company. They raised almost $100 billion and they failed. It's challenging. What is the challenge? We are trying to mimic human comparable to human level interaction, conversational and also social interaction. So this involves body language, emotion, intonation of voice, facial expressions, and all these things, both ways, both in terms of understanding the user as well as expressing it. To build a relationship that is based around empathy and support, and then you can use that. If you have built that connection, if you have built that engagement that is almost like a human level connection where there is trust, empathy, kindness, and feelings towards each other, now all of a sudden you have unlocked a massive opportunity for anything that has to do with teaching, mental health, therapy, social, emotional support, friendship, even entertainment, hospitality, and so like everywhere where you have human-centric services, you can all of a sudden unlock all of that with this kind of a technology, right? So that's what we have been focused on, and it's extremely hard. Like when we invented at Evolution Robotics the visual SLAM technology, the navigation technology, when we did it and how we did it, it was a breakthrough. And it was when we started, a lot of people said it's not possible. You're not going to be able to solve this problem. We solved it, and we were extremely proud about that. What we are trying to solve at Embodied is about 1,000 times more complex than that, because humans are this much more complex. Like, because the other problem is figuring out where you are and building a map of the environment and navigating the environment. This is you can describe this problem in a few sentences.
Right.
Describing the challenge of human interaction, it's so complex. There's so many subtleties to it. So living up to that expectation is very hard to do. But thank God, and this is why we started, we believe, although we were not sure, we believe that we are close enough and technology is evolving in the right direction for us to be able to close this gap. And fortunately, our prediction has been mostly right because of things like ChatGPT are actually going to make these things much easier. And ChatGPT is just the tip of the iceberg. What is happening with generative AI? We are seeing advancements in that area with, say, 10 to 100x per year.
Right.
And this has a compounding effect, right? If it's 100x this year, another 100x next year, another 100x the other year, in 3 years, it's going to be a million times better than what it is today. So we can close this gap and be able to meet the expectation of the user and be like a supportive human type interaction that is going to impact education. It's going to impact therapy. It's going to impact taking care of the elderly, companionship, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, and
so many use cases. It's phenomenal.
Even hospitality, right? There's companies that are coming to us and saying we would like to put a Moxie in every hotel guest room,
right?
As a personal concierge, for instance, right? So many applications. We have been very much focused on solving this interaction connection problem because that is the core. Once we unlock that, then all of a sudden you enable all these possibilities.
Right. So Moxie, for those that don't know, can see your interaction, can also do facial recognition, right? So is able to show when she's happy, when is a she, I'm not sure, but I'm going with she. And when she's happy, when she's curious, and all elements of that. It's very human-like in the conversation. So it doesn't feel like you're talking to a robot. It generally feels like you're talking to a friend. And you see it in the kids, right? Like I saw it in my son, and I'm excited to when my daughter finally meets Moxie and kind of the interactions that will happen with her as well too. So a part of why you were, how part of like when you guys realized that that was what was missing in the marketplace, because JPL, you mentioned, JPL was trying to do a similar thing. Were they not? Like, so where did JPL go wrong, do you feel, that you guys, you're like, oh, they missed the boat here. This is what needed to occur in order for this to work?
Yeah. So every company prior to us, they started without a clear mission statement of what are the problems that they're trying to solve. So they start working just on the technology. So Jibo, SoftBank, and all the others, they had these robots that were going to interact with humans, but they didn't focus on a problem solved. When we started, we said we were going to have a clear problem statement, which was helping children on the autism spectrum, because those are children that actually lack social skills. And you've got to train them. And what better than a robot that's going to really focus on building social skills to help them? That's going to be patient, non-judgmental, and kids with autism open up to robots in ways they do not open up to humans, because robots are easier for them to process than humans, right? So we had a clear goal of what we want to solve. The other thing is that Moxie is unlike any other robots that you compare to. No other robot has a realistic face, eyes that can make eye contact, face that can make facial expressions and look at you. Eye contact is the first thing you do when you sit in front of another person, because there's a lot of communication that happens through the eyes. You're paying attention to me, you're nodding to me to tell me that you're hearing me, right? I can show excitement and surprise and all this, a lot through the eyes, right? And no other robot has eyes. Then the arms. These other robots like Jibo didn't have arms. It was very cute design, but I would say Jibo was a glorified Alexa with some cute animations and so on, but it didn't have eyes, it didn't talk, it didn't have a mouth. It had abstract characteristics, but not human-like characteristics. We said, you know what, we're not going to cut corners. We're going to build human-like characteristics, but try to make it affordable. So not photorealistic human, but human-like. So like a cartoon character brought to life. And these are very difficult things to solve for, because eye contact, although it sounds easy, you got to do it very accurately and also not make it creepy and all these things. So making the technology that works well for that is not easy. And there's a long list of technologies we have to invent to make this work out.
Perfect. So I know we've talked a little bit about AI, and there's a lot of obviously incredible things that AI can do. And one concern for people is around child development and education, and obviously around consideration on is this safe? Is it not safe? All elements of that. What's your approach to this, particularly with Moxie? What are your thoughts around this subject as a whole?
So there's a few answers. I'll try to give simple answers because I know we also have limited time. So let's just talk about therapy on the autism spectrum. Although Moxie today is now for every child because it helps every child with child development milestones. But just let's start with autism to simplify the discussion. For every therapist, there's 350 people that need therapy in the US. For every one therapist, 350 clients, potential clients. That means 80 to 90% of the population are not getting active therapy.
Wow.
In autism, it's even worse, by the way. As a result, you have waiting lists that can be a year or longer even to get diagnosed. And then once you're diagnosed, then you have to find the therapist groups that can help your child. If you live in California, in New York, you could easily spend $400 to $500 per one session of therapy. You will learn if hopefully not, but if someone experienced their child is diagnosed with autism, they will learn that the recommendation is they should get about 20 hours of therapy per week. Multiply that by not even 500, multiply that by 100. That's $2,000 a week.
Wow.
Right? That you have to pay. It's usually more than that, but let's just simplify it. $10,000 a month. How many families can afford to pay $10,000 a month out of pocket? Insurance is supposed to cover it, but most therapists do not take insurance because they don't have to. The demand is very high for their service. They don't want to deal with insurance. It's just an example. So that's one piece. And we can keep going on. Like these kids need therapy. If they're not getting therapy, we are reducing their chances of success in life. They are not going to develop the skills for them to be successful in their career, in their relationships, in academia, and so on. In terms of privacy, of course, absolutely important, especially for the kinds of applications we are talking about, something we have taken super seriously. And I'll say this, we can talk about this a lot, but everything is encrypted. Any personal information is not shared with us. It's stored on the robot. Only the parents have access to it. And then on top of that, we have PAPA compliance, which is Child Online Privacy Protection Act, a third-party entity that audits us and gives us certification for this. And we have even gone as far as getting FERPA certification, which is the equivalent of HIPAA for schools, because we are beginning to sell to schools. And we are still going to get HIPAA compliance. So I would say in terms of standards for safety and privacy and data security, we are very rare in terms of how much effort we have put into this.
That's amazing. So Paolo, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing such incredible insights with us today, all the way from your journey from Iran and through the mountains of Turkey to Denmark, and then the lessons it's taught you around that, and then let alone your experience working at JPL, then transitioning to starting your company, Evolution Robotics, that eventually got acquired, and even buying that company back, and the lessons there and the partnerships. I mean, you provided so many wonderful insights. Thank you for coming on today. If people want to connect with you, what's kind of the best way for them to be able to reach out to you?
You can email me at paolo@embodied.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Paolo. This has been another episode of the Growth Ventures podcast. Please subscribe and look forward to hearing from you guys. And thank you everyone for listening in. Take care.